of Fame another
one? Today we have, a special guest today. We have Kevin Lewis. Me and Kevin, we've been talking on Twitter and other social media platforms for like maybe about a month and a half now, 2 months. And he's always bringing up good ideas and always showing love. So I just wanted to bring him on the show today. So yeah.
Good having you, man. Where are you out of? Where are you coming from, man?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, once again, man, I want to thank you guys for having me on your show. Once again, your content is excellent. But just getting right into it, I come from the area. I'm from the East Coast. I'm originally in the Bronx, New York, and I moved down to a small town called Utahville, South Carolina, and I've been South Carolina area ever since. I moved down here in elementary school. So between South Carolina and New York, I would go back and forth between summers, and that's my background. I am currently in the Charlotte metro area, right under Charlotte, North Carolina. So I see a lot of the youth, basketball, everything from the North Carolina perspective, from the Charlotte area perspective in particular. So that's where I reside now, and just currently just working with other kids between North Carolina and South Carolina within that metropolitan area. So that's that's where I'm at currently.
Okay, that's mad dope. My little brother, he went to prep school in Greenville, North Carolina. So that drive was from Kansas City. That drive was crazy. So I remember all of it. Yeah. So, just
North
quick
Carolina
question.
is huge, man. Like North Carolina is huge
and beautiful. I mean, I think that's something coming with age. Like I can, I find it interesting, like being outside. Like so basically, when I was driving from the airport and just all those trees and oh my goodness, it was a great scenery. So one of the questions I want to ask you, like, so then when did you fall in love with basketball? Like, when did you like feel like, man, this is really like, I mean, this is just what I just do. Like, this is what I just love.
Man, it was a very, very early age, man. And coming from New York, man, it's something that New Yorkers, especially back then, they live and breathe it. You know what I'm saying? And for me, it was about, I would say, 2 or 3 years old. My mom, she got me the Fisher-Price, Michael Jordan, basketball gold. I had my own room at the time. My sister wasn't born yet. So, I was the little spoiled one. So I had everything I wanted. And the only thing I would play with was that Fisher-Price basketball goal with the small orange basketball. And every day I was just hooping. And I think I really fell in love, when I saw, Jordan versus the Knicks, in those battles. My father, he used to, we used to back in the day, he used to dub tapes. So he used to dub all of the Knicks versus Bulls playoff games. And, the first time I actually fell in love with it was when Jordan was putting in work versus the Knicks. And, I'm a big Knicks fan. So by him putting in that work, I was like, oh my God. And I'm, like I said, I'm 2 or 3 years old at the time. So I probably don't comprehend it, but just looking at him in the air and doing all of this stuff, I'm like, yo, I think this is what I want to do, So I think that's when I fell in love with it. Purely fell with the game. And, with me having that Fisher-Price Michael Jordan basketball goal, it just took off from there.
Okay.
We all been there. No matter where you come from, I feel like if you're in a certain age group, like Jordan against your team or any type of, whether it's Jordans or whether it's that goal, like Jordan is kind of the centerpiece for like, oh wow, like this is dope. Like he's got swag, he can hoop, he's a black man. Like so I feel like he's definitely where we all like kind of got our love for the game from.
Facts. So
Absolutely. And one, I just mentioned this right quick. One gem about the Bronx, and I grew up in the projects, right? So my father, he's a DJ. So, he grew up in the same area. And one fun fact about where I stayed at, Mitchell Projects, Kyrie Irving's dad and Rod Strickland came from the same projects. So he knew those guys, and he played ball with those guys. So he used to tell me stories about Rod and about Kyrie Irving's dad all the time. And I actually went to elementary school with Rod Strickland's nephew. I went to pray. His name was BJ. I went to first grade with him. So, that's a little fun fact about me and the connection with the Bronx. So
A lot of good hoopers come from that area, man. Lots of great hoopers come from that area, man.
that's crazy.
yeah.
So tell the viewers, because we were like, conversating before about what we want to get into, but tell the viewers before we get into what we're going to talk about your time at Clemson and being a walk-on and, people, I think the reason why we call ourselves the bench starters is like we get the platform to people who don't always get the praise. Mm-hmm. And I think, being a walk-on or being a scout player, that's one of those people that don't always get the praise that do help teams a lot. Like, what I'm saying? Like, it helps teams a lot in college, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, once again, I played it. Actually, a funny story. My junior year of high school, my team, coming from a small town in South Carolina, every year we went to the Clemson team camp. Right? And actually, it was my junior year, and we had one guy on our team named Otay Sellers. And he was like a hot topic in our area. Like, he was all state. He was region player of the year. He finished like in the top 3 voting for state player of the year. He was that deal. And he had offers to Clemson, and he had interest from Syracuse and Maryland at the time. And while we were at this camp, Oliver Purnell, who was the head coach at that time, like, he took his time out of his busy schedule to come watch him play. He was like, forget everything. I'm going to watch Otay play today. So at the time, I think Otay was looking more into like Syracuse and Maryland, just more importantly, just because of those, legendary names that were coaching those teams at the time. So, he's having a great game, but at that time, he was a starting point guard, and I was his backup. So, I would come into the game, and give him a breather. And for some reason, I had a phenomenal game that day. Defensively, decision making, just the whole nine. Just scoring whenever I can. And Coach Purnell, he took a liking into that. So we spoke with my high school coach, and the following year, the summer going into my senior year, we went back to the camp, and he continued to just kind of watch me. And at that time, he didn't have any scholarships available. So spoke to him, listen, if you can get him to come to Clemson, I can give him a preferred walk-on spot. And all this time, like, my high school coach isn't telling me anything. So basically, I think it was just a psychological thing, like, just to say, you know what, just let him continue to stay hungry, because if I tell him this, he might get a big head.
Yeah.
And me, I'm a humble guy. I'm not, I don't look for praise for anything. So I might disagree with that, but after talking, to him about it, it kind of makes sense why he did what he did. So, I only had, I literally had all academic scholarships. A lot of them were ACC schools, of course, from an academic side. One was for Vanderbilt and the other was for Emory. But, I just wanted to focus on two schools, basically, Clemson and Winthrop. And Winthrop University is in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and they're actually that's where my guy at Wichita State came from before he went to Wichita State. So when I got this letter for Clemson, I was like, oh man, I was excited, and that was it. Like once I got the acceptance letter from Clemson, that's it. I'm going to Clemson, and it was I'm connected to Syracuse as well because it's New York. And, I was like, what better way to represent, it's in state, and at that time, I didn't have a scholarship to Syracuse, which going back into the story, Syracuse is one of my favorite schools, because they bred a lot of great, players. But since I wasn't going, back to New York, I might as well, come to Clemson. So, got accepted into Clemson. I get in, and the first person who calls me is Will Wade. At that time, he was the director of basketball operations for Clemson. Calls me up and he says, "Hey, Kev, we followed you all throughout our camps, and we're, once again, we're very interested in seeing what you can bring. So, just come to a few of our workouts. And then after the workouts, we'll play, some open runs and we'll see what you have." And, once again, very humble and very, very excited at the same time. And that's when I first met Trevor Booker. Trevor Booker, he just retired, just spent 8 years in the NBA and just announced his retirement 2 weeks ago. So shout out to my boy Book. He was an incoming freshman at the time as well. So, I'm going through the open runs, and my favorite player at Clemson at that time was Vernon Hamilton, and Vernon Hamilton was a problem, in the ACC. He was the all-time ACC steals leader. Very good point guard, and I'm kind of starstruck. I'm like, oh my God, this is the ACC. I know Clemson at that time wasn't the best looking team, but I'm like, it's still the ACC. These guys are playing North Carolina, Duke. They're playing Wake Forest. Wake Forest was hot at the time. Virginia Tech was coming into the ACC. Boston College was coming into the ACC and stuff like that. So I was like, man, in my eyes, these guys are stars. They're on TV. So, I come in and, they're looking at me during the open run, and I'm killing, and it's like innocent killing too. Like I'm starstruck, so I ain't trying to show nobody up. I'm like,
facts.
After the whole workouts and open runs, man, like Will Wade was like, you know what? Come to the tryouts and just look decent, man. Just look decent. I think we have our point guard, because their backup point guard, he actually transferred. So they literally did not have a backup point guard. Cliff Hammonds was playing the backup point guard role, and he was naturally a two guard. So, I come in and, go through the tryouts, and they select another point guard by the name of Chris Poole. Shout out to Chris Poole. And, at that time, I literally thought I made it. You know what I'm saying? For me to not have a single D1 offer coming out of high school, I had a couple NAIA offers, but, I was always leaning towards one of the higher education schools. So, I just decided against it. But to be a no name and walk on to Clemson, that was a huge accomplishment. The only regret that I have was me having the discipline to stay on, because with being a walk on, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You still got to be a student, and you don't get the the amenities or the benefits that scholarship guys normally get. When you're a walk on, so I had to navigate through all of that, and I had to learn that. And unfortunately, I didn't stay on the team, but the experience while I was there was just phenomenal. I was able to play in the orange and white game. I was a game away from playing in one of the exhibition games versus the Lithuania national teams. So it was a great experience, man. It was a great experience.
So quick question, Kevin. Me and James, so we went to an NAI school for our education. Like thinking back now, would you have like decided to go to an NAI school or possibly a D2 school or anything like that? Do you not so much regrets, but do you like, could you see yourself at one of those sort of schools?
Without question. That's what made me grow, not only as a player, but as a human being, because, beggars can't be choosers, you know what I'm saying? So at that time, and I'm not saying that I was a D1 point guard. If me looking at myself back then, I would categorize myself as a high D2 point guard, or maybe a mid D2 point guard, between mid and high D2 point guard. If I'm looking at myself after growing and understanding the game that I understand it in now, that was my profile. And if I had to choose again, yeah, I would definitely go. And the NAI school at the time was Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So that was one of the things that I do regret, especially if I wanted to hoop, because that's all I wanted to do.
That's what it comes down to. Just wanting to play. Yeah.
But at the same time, from an academic perspective, I was a nerd. I was a straight up nerd. So, I'm not necessarily looking at the Ivy League schools, but when Vanderbilt sent me a scholarship offer, I was blown away.
Man.
So
that's huge. That's huge.
Of course, I took into consideration. Yeah, I took into consideration, my family, staying in state. Clemson had a very good business program, a growing business program, because that's what I wanted to get into. I wanted to get into business. So, them and Winthrop, they were very high from a perspective. Even though at that time, for sure, Clemson was definitely known as an engineering school, but their business college was up and coming and booming. So, that's mainly part of it. But if I had to do it all over again, and if I wanted to straight up hoop, yeah, I definitely would have taken all of the offers that was handed to me. So,
from going on this, so now like you went to Clemson and you graduated. Now you have heavy handle hoops. When did you start that, and what's the impact that heavy handle hoops brings to the world of basketball?
Absolutely. So heavy handle hoops was established in 2017, and heavy handle hoops actually just came out. It was a year where my wife and I had just moved to Columbia, South Carolina, because we were actually building a new house in Fort Mill, South Carolina. So we spent the plan was to spend 8 months to a year in Columbia. And at that time, and I know this is another question that you will probably ask, so I'm going to just go right into it. My mentor, Coach Joshua Staley, who is currently the head coach for AC Flora High School in Columbia, he was a second-year coach, no, actually, was a third-year coach there, and he had just come off a state championship.
Yeah.
And you know, he came to me and he was like, "Listen, Kev, I know you're moving down to Columbia. You know, why don't you come sit on the bench with us? You know, come be a coach for the year with us." So you know, I became a part of his staff. I loosed a part of his staff, and basically what I was just doing for him was, you know, coming to practices, you know, making sure that you know, practices were scouted correctly, going through film work and going to other schools and scouting opponents, taking, you know, hefty notes, making sure that, you know, we have everything from a competitive advantage perspective against that opponent, you know, any given night that we're playing. And, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know, I got a good grasp on it. I've always been doing that. It's from a analysis perspective, like scouting teams and breaking down film. I've always done that, even when I was at Clemson. But, you know, I guess Coach Staley's, you know, kind of, I guess, saw a gift, and he was basically telling me, you know, you use this gift. So, you know, after the season, we ended up losing in the semifinals, not the semifinals, the quarterfinals of the state championship. And you know, my wife told me, you know, you spent all this time with Coach Staley, like you need to go ahead and establish, you know, your a consultant business. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, dude, you're doing all of this, and like, you don't have to just do it for Coach Staley. You can be your own consultant. You can consult with different high schools, you know, and we can do it to where it's not a competitive advantage to others. So you just pick. At that time, we had four different high school classes. So she basically said, you pick maybe 2 schools out of each class that are polar opposite of each other, and, you know, start consulting, do analysis, do scout work, and, you know, call it, what should I call it? She was like, you're a point guard, and you got the sickest handles I've ever seen. Call it heavy handles. And I'm like, it's not a bad idea. You know what I'm saying? So
That's dope.
And that's where Handle Who started. And that added to kind of like the training of it. Because going back to what she was saying, she was like, yo, like I said, you got the sickest handles I've ever seen. You taught me how to handle the ball. And my wife was all state when she played. So shout out to my wife, Candace Lewis. And, you know, by her telling me that, you know, that's where the training came in at. So I started utilizing the scouting, this film work, and started utilizing that with training. And that's the impact that I bring to the basketball world. I bring the film study onto the basketball court, and I tell, you know, my clients, listen, this is what we're doing from a film perspective. We're going to study film on you. We're going to see where you can improve at, and we're going to see what you're already great at.
Okay,
and we're going to enhance that, and anything that you need to improve on, we'll make you better at that. So my whole platform is film study plus the training aspect to it. So that's my impact to the world of basketball. So that's how I bring impact from a heavy under hoops perspective.
I like it a whole lot, man. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It's such an original idea. It's such like it has depth. I'm sure there's a whole lot you can do with it. And I'm sure above all else, if you love basketball, I'm sure it's fun. Like, I think the best aspect about basketball for me is like just learning, like there's always something new that's popping up in the game that you're like, wow, that's a detail that I didn't pay attention to last time, and that now I caught. So now I can just add it to like the millions of other ideas I have in my head, as far as watching basketball. So like that's a super dope idea, man.
Super dope.
Absolutely.
You'll go far with that. I'm sure you will, especially having the experiences that you've had up to this point. So that's great to hear, man.
I appreciate it.
So kind of circling back to what we were talking about before we start recording. So I mean that heavy handles like that's so dope. Like that's so dope. So when you're coming in contact with kids and programs, what do you think there are some issues that you feel like that can be changed in the youth and the grassroots aspect of basketball right now?
So I call it, we're going to keep it all the way 100. I'm probably part of the problem. So I grew up in an era where, everything was trial by fire. So I was thrown out bulls when I was playing as a kid, playing against older guys, pickup basketball. You don't learn anything until you get on the court and actually do it. Try to move yourself to do it. Nowadays, technology has increased and it's expanded and platforms have expanded to now today's kids, literally all they want is a trainer and they get busy from that perspective. They don't go out. They don't play pickup basketball. All they want to do, they just want to get in the gym by themselves with their trainer and they try to get better at that. That's all fine and dandy because, like I said, I'm a part of it. But what separates me from that is I tell my kids, have you played pickup? When is the last time you played pickup? Oh, I played maybe a couple ago. Well, how do you know the moves that we've been studying based on your film? How do you know it's going to work if you're not, using it against anybody?
Yeah.
So you got a point there, coach. So my whole thing is, from a grassroots perspective, let's go back to the basics. Let's go back to the pickup games. And I know at that point, concrete, it hurts your knees, right? Going to the parks and playing. That was part of our culture. We went to the parks in the concrete
outside
and played. And you were outside. You were out there, and if you lost, you're probably 5-6 games down. So you had to continue to win and stay on the court. And that was the competitive spirit that brought us, who we are. So, nowadays I don't necessarily see that. So a lot of today's kids, they try to utilize AAU and they try to utilize basketball as their particular segue to get better, which once again is all fine, it's all cool. But what are you doing behind the scenes? Are you calling your friends up? Hey, let's get a game together. Let's do twos. Let's do threes. Let's do fours. A lot of the pickup games that we grew up on, the 2-on-2s, the 3-on-3s, the 4-on-4s, those smaller groups, they taught us spacing. They taught us cutting. So when you're playing 5-on-5, you're not just standing in one spot. So when you're playing your 3-on-3s, it teaches you how to set that screen with great spacing. Those 2-on-2s, it teaches you pick and roll. It teaches you certain aspects of the game that you don't even know that you're learning. So
exactly.
That's where the game to get back at. Everything I live by this. There's simplicity in art. People a lot of times when they look at an art figure, they try to overanalyze what they're looking at. But the artist is just simply telling you to just look at the picture and tell me what you see. So it's always simplicity in art, and the art of basketball is the same way, simplicity. So I just wanted to get back to the basics, to the fundamentals of the game, and when you use that, pickup is the simplest form of getting better you can get at. You know, having those guys on that court and just playing the game. You know, you don't know if you're better unless you try, especially in house. So that's where I see where we can definitely improve the game, and let's utilize the technology in today's space. You know, we can always do that. You know, Huddle is out there, Synergy is out there. You can always use those platforms. It's not a bad thing to use them. But let's get back to the fundamentals of the game. You know, and some of the greatest players, you know, they were very simple. Tim Duncan is, to me, the greatest power forward to play the game because he was so simple.
He ain't gonna like that. James ain't gonna like that. James ain't gonna like that.
I mean, he's up in there.
You're right, by the way, Kevin. You're right, by the way.